All right. I'm Dr. Beth Johnson. I'm actually work with the State Veterinarian's office in Kentucky. I practiced for about 25 years down in central Kentucky, have been raising meat goats since 2004, and I raised dairy goats since the early 70s. So, I started in Texas, migrated to Mississippi State, then moved up here to Kentucky. So I've been in 3 different environments. Mississippi and Kentucky are identical in their environment. Just gets a little bit colder up here. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to actually talk through the parasite resistant. I'm sure you guys have. I'm going to probably repeat a lot that doctor, and I'm going to butcher your name, but it's Bowdridge. Awesome, I got it right. I'm going to probably repeat a lot of stuff that he's mentioned this morning, but you know, the only thing good about repeating is it soaks in a little bit better. So with further ado, let's go on to the next slide. This is what we're going to discuss in the next hour. We're going to talk about the parasite problem, which, you know, hopefully with the St. Croix, you don't have too much of a parasite problem, but if you ever venture out and get another breed, you may end up having some problems. Why do we have resistant parasites? The parasite life cycle. I'm sure that was discussed this morning. Quick review of the dewormers that are available and what we can do to, number one, slow down resistance, and also to use our smarts as far as deworming goes. Okay? So next slide. So this is the big problem facing producers. I'm a boar goat producer. Boar goats, I think, are the parasite haven for Haemonchus, and it's a huge problem. Anthelmintic resistance is considered the major threat to small ruminant production. It's the number one killer I know in our state of meat goats, dairy goats, sheep. We've seen quite a few hair sheep even, the Katahdins, the Dorpers that come into the graded cells that definitely are suffering from parasite issues, primarily in the fall of the year, okay? So, and we'll do some, you know, talk about why that is, why we see it worse in the fall than in the spring. It is worldwide. Everybody has it. Don't think that just Indiana and Kentucky, you know, we're in this little section of the United States and we are just burdened with these parasites. It's everywhere. It's in Texas. It's in California. It's everywhere. It may not be as bad in southwest Texas, where they get an inch of rain a year and we get 50 inches of rain. But it is there. And then we have a prevalence of a multi-drug resistant worm that we're trying to deal with in our production. Okay. So what is resistance to this parasite? What is resistance to that the animal exhibits? The resistance with the parasite, it's the ability of certain worms in a population to survive drug treatments, in other words, a deworming, that are generally effective against the same worm species and stage of infection. In other words, when you deworm that animal and the worms that survive are resistant worms that survive that anthelmintic treatment. Caused by changes in levels of resistant genes that the worm carries. And those are resistant genes to the dewormer that you're using. And it's also a result of drug treatment, overuse of drug treatment, and treating them incorrectly, underdosing, lots of reasons. So that's what we're going to cover in this next hour. All right. Go ahead. So, where do these resistant worms come from? They don't just fall out like manna and land on the ground. We have created this monster. We certainly have created these resistant worms. It's an inevitable consequence of using a certain drug over and over and over again. And rotation of dewormers have created this bug. When we deworm real often, because a doe or a ewe doesn't respond to the treatment and we never do fecal exams, then we should have that dewormer taken from us and allow it, and sell that animal and get rid of that animal, because she is, or he is, doesn't have any resistance. And the only way you can deal with resistant worms is by selecting for resistance in your animal or doing selective drug treatments. Maintain that refugia. And I'm going to really bit. Treatment eliminates the worms whose genes render them susceptible to the drug. In other words, the worms that were susceptible to the dewormer that you gave that animal dies, but the ones that survive are the ones we have to worry about. Parasites that are resistant survive, and then guess what? They breed, and then they pass that resistant gene on to within that animal. Over time, with continued treatment, more and more resistant worms build up in the population. Makes sense, does it not? The other thing that has really, really spurred this on is the high level of animal movements. We can have an animal in Maryland on one day, and in 2 days she be in California, or he. I go down to Texas and buy my weather bucks, bring them up to our farm in Kentucky. The one thing I do with that animal is that animal goes in isolation. It has a fecal exam done. When I get that animal home and I check for check for the worm load, deworm that animal, 10 days later I'm doing another fecal exam. I want to make sure that I'm not bringing resistant worms onto my place. If you don't do that now, start it, okay? Learn how to do a fecal exam. That's going to really, really help you down the road. Okay. All right, so what are the bugs that we have to deal with? Well, right here, of course, is our biggest one. Haemonchus contortus, it's a killer. It's called a barber pole worm. And I've got some pictures of it here in a little bit. But it's called a barber pole because when you look at the female, she's got a red and a white striated body. And it looks like a barber pole, the old barber pole that we had out in front of shops. The red is the blood that she sucks out of the animal, and the white is her egg pouch. This little creature can put out some eggs. She can put a laying hen to shame in the number of eggs that she produces. We also have to worry about the Ostratasia and the Trichostrongylus, but not as much. Folks, you can have an animal, a sheep or a goat, with haemonchus, never have scours, and die. And people will say, this goat died suddenly. Did you happen to notice that she wasn't coming up to the feed bunk or wasn't going out to graze? She was just laying in the shade quite a bit. Well, it was hot. Well, yeah, it was hot, but her cohorts were out there. They don't die suddenly. It's because we didn't see them getting sick, okay? They don't have to have diarrhea. Do they usually? Yes, but they don't have to have diarrhea to die from haemonchus. We also have to worry about nematodiarus, especially if we're using ivermectin, because nematodiarus is resistant to ivermectin. And I've seen some sheep flocks that use the ivermectin drench through years to years, and all of a sudden have a complete population of nematodiarus, and they will die from that. Coccidia, big killer of our lambs and our kids. If you don't control coccidia, how are you going to know that you have coccidia? You have a 3-month-old kid that's scouring. How do you know that you have coccidia? Somebody in the audience tell me. You have a 3-month-old kid. Bingo. That's right. If you don't think you have a problem with coccidia, then you haven't looked. I mean, it's ubiquitous. It's very species specific. The coccidia that infects sheep and goats, it does not infect chickens. It does not infect calves. So keep that in mind. But it will flat affect performance. Okay, question is the coccidia that infects chickens, can it infect sheep and goats? No. So we do see coccidia in chickens. We also see it in rabbits. You know, that species is specific for that species. Okay? So, you know, a lot of people think, well, my goats got coccidia from my chickens, or got it from my rabbits, or my dog got coccidia from my goats. But it does not happen that way. Okay? Just remember that. And then tapeworms, guys, I know they look horrible, but they're really never going to usually cause a problem. Where I see tapeworms at, though, we have show goats. And I don't know what it is about our show barn, because it's about the cleanest barn in the world, but we see tapeworms. And it's because these little guys are out on the fields up until they're about 3 or 4 months old. They eat the snail that has the tapeworm larva, and then they get down in the show barn, and guess what? They're just laying around, and the tapeworms just suddenly appear. Well, they're never going to cause any harm, usually, but we got to get, you know, we see it a lot of times. When we see tapeworms, we'll do a fecal, and they'll generally have some other worm along with that tapeworm. So a lot of times, you know, the treatment for tapeworms is about the same as it is for all the other worms. So yes, they're unsightly, but just think that they're not going to usually, if it's just a tapeworm infection, it's not going to cause a problem. Okay. This is our life cycle. The sheep comes along, grazes a blade of grass that has the L3 larva. That goes into her stomach. And then it sets up in the abomasum. I'm talking about homunculus here. It'll set up in the abomasum, go from L3, L4, L5 to the adult stage. The adult is what latches on to the abomasal lining, which is the true stomach. And if you ever necropsy a goat or a sheep that is heavily parasitized, you open up that abomasum, you will be shocked. There's red wigglies everywhere. And they're really tiny, but if you get them under a microscope, you can see that barber pole effect. But they're moving everywhere, especially if the animal has just recently passed away. But that's where the adults are. And then she latches on into the abomasum and just starts her productive egg production. And then it starts all over again. It'll pass out in the feces. The eggs will drop to the ground in a fecal pat, and then develops L1, L2, L3, climbs up the blade of grass. How high can they climb? What if you keep your grass about 4 to 6 inches high? Will that's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah, you want to keep your grass that high. If you short graze, you're going to have a problem. 2 inches. They don't ever get higher than 2 inches. So try to keep your grass about 4 to 6 inches that you're grazing. If you're lucky, like me with goats, they don't even like grass. They would much rather have brush. So you can adapt their environment and control the parasites that way too. Okay. So we're going to talk about homunculus primarily. As I said, this is the lady that kills everything. You know, parasites are supposed to be symbiotic. They're not supposed to kill their host. But let me tell you, she never read the book, and she will flat kill her host. So these little guys just latch on in the abomasal lining and just go to town sucking the blood of these poor animals. Very prolific. Like I said, one adult female produces 5,000 eggs per day. I mean, you know, if we could get chickens to do that, we'd be doing pretty good. So, very short life cycle. From egg to adult can be 3 weeks if the environment is right. These guys can go into a hibernation phase, like in the wintertime, and they can slow down their development, and then when it warms up, they just go to town. We have what we call a periparturient rise. Has anybody heard about that? Where right before kidding or lambing, the female will, all of a sudden, these worms say, ooh, we see a little bit of stress coming on. Let's ramp up, because guess what? We talked about it this morning. immune system. Their immune system, at parturition is the most immune suppressive time for that ewe in her whole yearly life cycle in that year. So her immune system drops just a little bit, and these worms, they may not have a brain, but boy, they know what's going on. So, and there's a periparturient rise in the number of adults laying eggs. And so you'll see that in the fecal egg gram count. Right around kidding or lambing. This is when, I recommend to most of the producers that I work with, this is when they should deworm these animals if they have a problem. So, because that's the biggest time. I get the phone call all the time. The sheep or the goat is 3 or 4 weeks post kidding or lambing, and all of a sudden they have diarrhea and they have no milk for their babies are just withering away because they have no milk. Did you deworm them when at kidding or lambing? Well, no, she looked fine then. Well, that periparturient rise hit, and then she got heavily infected, and so now she's not being able to produce milk. Okay. This is the young lady, and as you can see here, you can see that barber pole type effect. Remember, the white is eggs and the red is the blood. This is an abomasal lining of a heavily parasitized animal. And literally, I mean, I'm not kidding you when I say you can open these guys up and that's what you'll see on these heavily parasitized animals. Okay. So, what do? I love this poster child here. I work at a lot of the graded sales. This animal was a year old, and it weighed 20 pounds. It probably was supposed to be at least 70 or 80 pounds. I don't think it was a Nigerian dwarf, although management made it that way. Okay? You can tell by that horn length that that's about the only thing that grew on this goat, was his horn length. White mucous membranes, couldn't hardly stand. I don't know why people even bring them to the cells. I mean, this kid probably didn't make it out of the ring. So you can see the bottle jaw on that kid. He has no muscle whatsoever. He is literally wasted away to just a hide stretched over bones. And that was his eye color. So, all right, next one. So, why is it such a problem? As we talked about, 5,000 eggs a day. She's very prolific. 50 goats produce 1 billion eggs per week. So, a lot of our commercial herds, 50 is not unheard, not that much. So we've got 1 billion eggs being laid across the field each week. And this is kind of a neat picture that I got, I grabbed. I think everybody has that picture. And that's a water droplet on a blade of grass with the infective larva in it. I think it's a cool picture. And of course, when you're doing a fecal, this is the strongyle type egg. That's what I tell everybody. It's a strongyle type egg. If this is horse fecal material, these would be strongyles. In dogs, they're hookworms. And in goats, they're HOTs. Because you can't tell the difference between a homunculus, an ostratasia, or a trichostrongylus. You can tell the difference in a nematodiris. Nematodiruses are much bigger. But with those are considered HOTs, and you don't need to figure out if it's homunculus, ostratasia, or trick. You just know that they have that many eggs in a gram of feces. Okay. Ostratasia, just to talk about it a little bit, it's a parasite primarily in New Zealand. We don't see it a whole lot in the United States. Where we do see it a lot is in the cattle. But ivermectin has almost taken this out of the ostratasia, has almost become non-existent in cattle because of the use of ivermectin. And we got rid of that inhibited larval state that the ostratasia does with the use of ivermectin. But it is a problem in globally it's probably a huge problem. it does stay in the abomasum just like the homunculus does, and they affect digestion, absorption, but they don't suck blood. Okay, so they really affect the nutrient utilization. This and Trichostrongylus, you will see diarrhea. Okay, you will see diarrhea with these two. Okay. So this is, how did resistance develop? These are some of the things that, and I can tell you historically, man, these were definitely done. In the early 70s, we were raising dairy goats in Texas. We didn't see too much problem with parasites. How many of y'all have heard this common saying, my grandfather had a goat or two on his fields. He never had any problems with that goat. Well, no, he didn't, because he had one or two, and he didn't have a whole herd of them. And we didn't have, these were animals that grew up here, were used to here, and they were resistant. And then we started bringing all these goats in from Texas. We started moving animals across the United States, and we started seeing the resistant develop. But in the early 70s, or I guess 78, 79, when ivermectin came on the scene, oh my gosh, our prayers were answered. We treated everything every 6 weeks. Man, did we do a good job of creating resistance. To this day, guys, my dairy goat herd, they're still, I still have, we've kept, breeding dairy goats since the 70s. To this day, I can't use ivermectin on those goats. Ivermectin will not work. Does not do anything. And that's like 40 some odd years later. So pretty cool. Or we did by the calendar year. This is really big in horses. In the spring you use this dewormer. In the early summer you use this one. In the late fall you use this one. And then in Christmas you definitely give them the Parasite. Well, I started doing fecal counts on my horses. I have trail riding horses. And when I did a fecal, guess what? They didn't need it. They didn't need any deworming. And so the push now is to definitely do fecal exams on horses. One pasture that, if you don't rotate, you're going to have a problem. Overcrowding and grazing, that causes a problem. It wasn't too long ago when we told everybody, deworm them and then put them out on a clean pasture. I can remember saying that 5 or 6 years ago. And bingo, Dr. Kaplan says, don't do that. When you deworm them and you put them immediately out on clean pasture, what goes out on that clean pasture? All your resistant eggs. Okay? So you just propagate it. So when you deworm, you want to hold them for about a week or so, and then you can turn them out onto that clean pasture. And then the final one, we purchased those resistant worms. Quarantine. If COVID has done anything, please tell me it has helped us with learning biosecurity. It really, really has. So thank goodness we had that. Okay, next one. So what causes a resistant to the dewormer that we're using? Lack of refugia. That's the number one cause. Refugia is when you keep susceptible parasites back so that they can breed with the resistant ones and pass their susceptible genes on to the resistant ones. We've got to have refugia in our herd or flock. Refugia is the proportion of the worm population that is not selected by drug treatment. In other words, there's animals in our flock or herd that we don't treat. And they still have eggs. They're just not heavily infected, right? So we want to make sure, we don't want to, if an animal needs to be treated, it needs to be treated. But if they don't need to be treated, don't treat them. And then the eggs and larvae that are out on pasture, we don't want resistant eggs and larvae out there. Refugia provides a pool of sensitive genes. Just remember that. It dilutes out the resistant genes. And that last statement there is considered the most important factor in the development of drug resistance, the lack of refugia. If we have refugia, we don't have drug resistance. So remember that. Okay. Treatment strategies that decrease your refugia, once again, calendar. We treated them every 6 weeks. All the herd. Treat the entire herd. Does that mean we can't treat a group of weaned lambs? Yeah, we can. We can treat them. But you know what's better? Is to check their eye color and see if they need to be treated. Or do a fecal exam and see if they need to be treated. They may have been on this lush field that was, knee high, and they probably don't need, they may not have a problem. Now, if you're buying them at the stockyards, which I don't recommend doing, but if you're bringing in a group of, if you're buying feeders, you better be deworming them because you have no clue where they come in. But you also better be treating them for coccidia. Frequent treatments, 3 treatments per year. If you have to do an animal 3 treatments in the year, you know where she needs to go? She needs to take a trailer ride in the fall of the year. Actually, the spring of the year is the best time to do it because you know what? Prices go up a little bit in the spring of the year. And if you sell her in the spring, she's not going to contaminate your ground. So, anyways, but realizing that a lot of these we don't have the option. We have to sell them when we can. Underdosing. You've got to learn the weights. You've got to know the weights of your animals. If you have a 150-pound ewe and you dose her for a 100-pound ewe, you've underdosed her. And guess what? Most of the parasites will survive that treatment. So do that. Okay. So, we talk about resistance. How do we keep it from developing? Well, it's a natural event. Well, it's natural, but man-made. The bug, the worm says, I'm going to do what I can do to survive. We can't become extinct. We just heard that 23 animals and plants and stuff like that became extinct. Well, these worms are never going to become extinct. Don't worry about that. It'd be great if it did. The rate of development of resistance is within our control and can be greatly reduced by smart drenching, refugia, stuff like that. So, okay, next one. Come on, you're falling down. So these are the dewormers that we have available. And guess what? This one is the most recent one, maybe 20 years ago. So we haven't had a new one in a while. Everybody keeps talking about there may be some coming down the pipeline, but don't hold your breath because you might die. So hopefully there will be something. The thing that has changed, though, is our way that we're deworming. I mean, it has evolved, and we've learned so much over the last 40 years with deworming. So important. So, yes, this is what we have to work with, but we don't need to concentrate on what we have to work with. What we need to concentrate on is how we can best manage our animals to prevent parasites. Not use the dewormers as our crutch. So, we need to reserve those suckers so that when we have to, we have them available to us. 3 classes. This is the white dewormers, benzimidazoles, Panicure, ivermectin, Safeguard, Panicure, Valbazin, Safeguard. Those are your white, the albendazoles, Synanthic. I'm trying to do the trade names. But those are the white dewormers. How effective are the white dewormers by themselves? Pretty pitiful, aren't they? Pretty pitiful. So, and then we have the avermectins, the milbemycins, the sidectins, the ivermectins. Anybody use generic ivermectin? Good. No hands were raised. Do not use generic ivermectin. Okay? It's cheap, and it's cheap for a reason. It's not been shown, especially in the cattle. The generic pour-ons have have been shown not to work. So try to avoid those if you can. And this is a $10,000 word, but I'm going to call it levamisol. I cannot pronounce that. I can try, but I'll butcher it to death. But it's your levamisols, Morantels, those. Now, a question that has been raised a lot is there's a Morantel that's in the feed. Can you give that? Well, it's approved for use in dairy cattle. It doesn't work very well. And Safeguard is in blocks, that you can put out there and deworm animals with, and that's doing nothing but creating major resistance. I don't think they work at all. So, in small ruminant production, stay away from the feed, stay away from the blocks. Okay? All right, next one. When you do get resistance to a dewormer, you get resistance in that class. So say you develop resistance to ivermectin. Cydectin may work 1 or 2 times, but chances are you'll get resistance to cydectin too because they're in the same class. Okay? So once you get resistance, and that's because of the resistant gene that the worm harbors. He's resistant to that effect that dewormer has on that parasite. So the ones that survive can bypass that effect. So that's why we get resistance in one class. Okay. Yeah. So what do we do when none of the dewormers work? Well, you've created it. Guess what? That's time to really you've got to use management. If you're an all confined, small, overgrazed lot and none of your dewormers work, then it's time for you to raise rabbits or chickens, something else, because it's not going to, you won't be able to find something else. Now, if you have a really nice farm and can separate off the pastures, then you can do some little bit of rotational grazing, develop that, but you've got to start picking out those resistant animals and breeding those resistant animals. And you guys are way ahead of the ball game because St. Croix are already resistant, are perfect, okay? So in the boar, and I had to do that with my herd when I started the boar herd. And we've done it over time with our dairy goats because you know what? The ones that weren't resistant, we couldn't deworm them all the time and keep the worms out of them. So they eventually died, And with my boar herd, when I started it in 2004, any of the ones I had to deworm more than 3 times a year, they took a trailer ride. And I don't ever, my bucks, I may deworm them right before breeding season, and that's all I do. If they have to be dewormed frequently, they are not going to be service sires on my farm because they will pass those genes on. It's real, okay? But there is, where once again, it's not just Indiana and Kentucky, it's worldwide that we have total anthelmintic failure. Okay. So, I'm painting a really grim picture, but when you go home and look at your flock, they look pretty good. And it's because you've tried. It's not as bad as it may seem. I'm going to just tell you the worst part about it, and then hopefully that'll sink in and you can try to avoid any of the problems. So, but we can work with this and develop, resistant animals. Smart drenching, allows us to really boost our the drugs that we use, and we can get rid of this resistance over time. Okay. So, like I said earlier, we cannot use the dewormers as our crutch. We've really got to pay attention and do management. We've really got to manage these guys appropriately. And we've got to control homunculus, and we do that through genetics, and also smart drenching, and we'll go through that here in a second. All right. We want to slow down the resistance, the development of resistance. Because once resistance is achieved, we have all these, these worms are resistant to every anthelmintic we can use. It's there. We can't go back. I mean, once a worm becomes resistant to a certain class of compound, they never get susceptible again. They really don't. We have seen that with levamisole, because we didn't use levamisole for about 20 years because it killed a lot of goats and sheep when we used it. And we used it injectable, okay? And unfortunately, we didn't know their weights very well. We've killed cattle by giving the injectable. But we didn't use it for about 20 years, and guess what? It has, when we get to the end of the line, and I have a producer bring me an animal that they said, we've given it Panicure, we've given it Safeguard, we've given it Valbazin. I said, have you tried anything else? But anyways, that's what the feed stores will give them, because that's the only thing that feed stores can give them. But we can usually come in with levamisole and do treat those. So, but we want to refugia. Okay. Smart drenching. So, smart drenching is using what we have learned in our management and our deworming to maximize the effectiveness of the treatments that we do have to give, but also decreasing the rate at which we create drug resistance. Okay? That's why we do smart drenching. Smart drenching is using our brain and not drenching the entire herd all the time. Okay. We want to know the resistance status of the herd or flock. How do you do that? Anybody know? You do a fecal, you deworm, and you can just, select maybe, if you have a herd of about 30 animals, do about 10% of them. 10% of 30 is what? 3 animals. That's not very hard to do. Or do different age groups. You get fecal samples, deworm them, 7 to 10 days later, do another fecal exam. Measure the effectiveness of that dewormer. You've got to know, don't just push something down their throat and say, well, that's good. I've done it. No, you've got to know if the dewormer you're using is working. Good pasture management. We have the best grass folks out west don't have the grass we have. Yes, they've got the dry environment, but the dry environment doesn't create the grass and the forages that we have here that we can utilize. We've got to utilize this pasture. Keep resistant worms off the farm. Once again, when you buy these animals, quarantine, test. Administer the proper dose. Utilize host physiology, periparturient rise. Keep that in mind. And then selective treatment. We don't treat the entire herd. We only treat those that need to be done. Okay. Everybody here that raises sheep better have one of these suckers. If you don't, then you should be shot. You should sell your animals immediately and not, raise sheep. You've got to have a drench syringe. That drench syringe has that little tip that's a little hook. What if you just use a little plastic syringe and you put it in their mouth? And you put it in their mouth and they go, and all of it gets sprayed over you. Yeah, if it's an absorbable one, maybe you got dewormed. But that animal did not. So this little drench syringe allows it to go to the back of the throat, and also, and they will, get that dewormer down them. Dewormers do not work if it doesn't go in the animal. Remember that. And it's critical that the full dose goes in, and it goes into the rumen. And then where is the bug at? It's in the abomasum, right? We want the dewormer to get to the abomasum where the parasite is at. And what we hope for is when we use that drench syringe that it bypasses the rumen and goes straight into the abomasum. And then efficacy is reduced if we don't use it, okay? In other words, if you don't get it in them, it doesn't work, okay? We want to utilize the host physiology to maximize drug efficacy. Some things that you can do if you're, they say if you decrease your rumen fill, then your dewormer doesn't have to compete with all of the feedstuffs. So fasting them for about 24 hours usually does help when you deworm them. Don't ever do this in late pregnancy. What will you induce if you don't feed a pregnant ewe? That can start the cascade of pregnancy toxemia, especially if she's carrying trips or quads. So don't ever restrict feed intake in a late pregnant animal. You can repeat the dose in 12 hours. If I have an animal come into me that's white, they're going to get, number one, they're going to get a cross on their head because you're going to need a little prayers to save that animal. But you're also going to be deworming that animal with probably a white dewormer and also usually Sidectin or levamisole. But you're going to use that white dewormer every day for about 5 days. So you're going to repeat it. And that really does help. And then we give them iron in some form. I use red cell with goats. You can't use red cell in sheep. St. Croix they don't have the copper problem, do they? They shouldn't. I mean, Katahdins don't usually have a copper. But if you have a wool sheep, don't give them copper, because a wool sheep will look at copper and keel over dead. So, but copper is an issue with wool sheep. Goats require it. But red cell, you can use red cell, which is an equine supplemental drench. It has B vitamins and it has iron in it. It's what the show people use to build up these horses. But it does pretty good. Just doing those two things can really, really help improve the efficacy. I use, in my herd of goats, I love copper oxide wire particles. The jury is still out. Some places it works, some places it doesn't. We did a really great study. You'll never see it published because it was just a student that was going into vet school at Murray State. And for the summertime, every month, they had a group of 15 animals in 3 different, 15 in, we did down in Georgia, you can send the feces down there, and I can't come up with the name of the test real quick, but it actually will culture the worms that you have on the farm and actually test its efficacy. Well, this farm that we used had resistance to every anthelmintic, had total anthelmintic failure, including levamisole, okay? And he knew he had a problem because he had to treat all the time. But we took 15 does and we used the dewormer that worked the best on that group. We took 15 goats and we did copper oxide wire particles, and then we had our control group where we didn't do anything. So the copper oxide wire particles, they did better as far as we took packed cell volumes, we did fecal egg counts, we measured their FAMACHA score, their body condition score, and I think that anything that died had to be necropsied. And we only lost, I think, 4 goats in the whole summer, which was good. One of them died of copper toxicity, and it wasn't. Oh, I know what others. The control group, we use copper sulfate drench, which in Kentucky there's this theory that copper sulfate drench works as a dewormer. Well, we wanted to test that out. Well, the copper sulfate drench, one of the goats died of copper toxicity. So, but the copper oxide wire particle, it was really good. It did help this farmer, did help his herd out. He'd been using them, but he didn't know why why he was using them, essentially. But that we had proof in the pudding, when we analyzed. This poor student, I don't think he knew what he had signed up for. He did that for 4 months. And he'd go out and do that every month. And so it was a pretty intensive. I wished we could gather that data and statistically analyze it and get a paper published. I presented it at the bovine practitioner meeting several years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago. But that student, when he gets in, he's at Auburn now. When he graduates, he's going into research. You know, he's way above me. So, but copper oxide wire particles do work. So does high tannin feed, Lespedeza. You know, a lot of the high tannin brush. The diatomaceous earth, the folks that I've seen use it are well-managed herds. They don't have a problem anyways. And they say it works for them. I said, well, you got to, you know, it's never really gotten a good test, I don't think. You know, they say it's supposed to help because it slices and dices the adults, but, you know, I don't know. You can use it. It doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt the animal. But I don't think it really is that efficacious. Pumpkin seeds, great in the fall of the year when there's so much pumpkin around because the goats love it. But I don't think they, you know, all of these natural anthelmintics, they don't have to be tested, you know, because they're not being sold as a dewormer. They're only about 30 to 40% effective as an anthelmintic. When we have these commercially available anthelmintics, and this is why we don't have new ones coming down the marketplace all the time, is they have to test, and they have to be 95% effective at reducing parasite numbers, the eggs. You know, and a lot of years of research goes into that. So that's, and a lot of money too. So that's one of the reasons why we don't see new ones come down the pike. Okay. No, you guys answer this question for me. You know the answer. Never. Never. Now, if I was standing up in front of an equine group 10 years ago, they would have probably shot me. Because, no, you have to rotate your dewormers. It's just like when I came out and practiced in the late 80s, I started practicing, and I would go out to see a horse, and they would say, it needs to be tube wormed. And I went, we have this thing called a tube of paste that if you will get it into the animal, it works a whole lot better than tube worming. I have to pass this tube down the nostril of this horse that doesn't, you know, horses didn't like it, you know, and we had to drug them, we had to twitch them, you know, and then we put organophosphates down in them. And some of those horses colic bad with that dewormer. But, oh, my goodness, you get into a walking horse barn, they had to be tube dewormed because that's what their father did and their grandfather did. So it took several years to convince them that that tube of paste really works, okay? But, you know, old habits die hard. So remember that we do not rotate dewormers. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. This is the new thought. If you have to deworm an animal, you use a combination product. Don't reach for that sidectin. Don't reach for that safeguard. Reach for both of them at the same time. Give the full dose to them at the same time. Okay? And I know I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I pull it up in the same syringe. I will use in the fall of the year, before I put them in with the buck, everybody gets sidectin and valbazin. Because I don't want to put any chemicals in that animal while she's incubating that baby. I deworm before I breed, and then I deworm at kidding, and I don't deworm my goats any other time. If I have to deworm them again, they're going to take a trailer ride. That's the 2 times I deworm. That would be for certain flocks, that would be true. You don't necessarily, I'm in confined operation. I know I have worms, so I know I have to treat them, okay? And I'm not treating the whole group because I don't put a buck out with my does. I pull out does and I pin breed them, okay? So if you've got several different pins around, you may want to get them up and do a FAMACHA on them and only deworm those that need it, because you may not have to. Once again, that horse that's out there in the pasture that we routinely dewormed, do a fecal on her, she's clean. Why do you give them a dewormer if there's no worms to treat? Some of these sheep, you're dealing with a breed that's resistant. Now, does that mean that they don't have any eggs if they're resistant? No, it does not. You do not look at a fecal sample to determine whether you need to deworm or not. You look at their eye color, look at their feet, their staining on it, do they have diarrhea? You look at their eye color, look at their body condition score. There's 3 different things you look at to determine, should I deworm that girl or not. So it depends on the time of the year. In the dead of summer, if you cut that pasture short, sunlight's getting down to the ground, you probably just about 3 or 4 weeks, you can kill off those eggs. Wintertime, there's, they can hibernate. They can go into, stay down in the ground and hibernate. Then it may take 3 or 4 months for that larva to die off. So it really depends on the time of the year. The best worm control is switching out a pasture from grazing to making hay on it, because you're cutting that pasture and harvesting the hay, and you're taking it out of the rotation for grazing. You're using another pasture for grazing that hasn't been used in a while. So just like you do with crops, you don't grow corn on the same cropland year to year to year. You switch out. Same way here. So, this is great. This is what we're here for. Mm-hmm. Perfect. So the life cycle, how from the total, when the environment is good, 70% humidity or higher, 80 degrees or higher. That's the perfect environment for this parasite to complete its life cycle, is 3 weeks. It can go from adult depositing her eggs to the next adult. So how long does it take to climb a blade of grass? It probably would take at least a week or so for that larva to get in. Remember, they have to have a dewdrop. So in the dead of summer, do we have any dew on the ground? Probably not. But you probably don't in the dead of summer. Yeah. There's like notoriously, and it may be in Arkansas, because I was in Texas there for a little while. In September, August and September are your driest months. You're probably not going to have too much problems with reinfecting these animals on a blade of grass, because there's not much dew in August and September. But here in Kentucky, I don't know of any time that we don't have a big old rain shower, and we get like 50 inches of rain. And Indiana's the same way, So, but in Arkansas, you've got, think about the dewdrop. That's what's infective. They've got to have moisture. That larva's got to settle in that dewdrop. It's not just on the blade of grass, really. It's got to have moisture. If it doesn't have moisture, it doesn't survive. Okay? So, and we'll be talking about something here in a second. I don't know if you guys know about the new biowormer that you can feed, but I've got a picture of that. I hope it's in this set of slides. But I'll talk about that. Okay? But drug combinations. 2 classes of compounds. Either you do a white dewormer with an ivermectin or a white dewormer and levamisole. And that's the new train of thought. So the reason behind that is by themselves, usually the ivermectins are about 70 to 80%, and some of them are still 90% effective. The white dewormers, less than 50%, usually. But in combination, it bumps up to about 95% effectiveness. Okay, and there's some science behind that, and we don't need to be bogged down by the science. Okay, next slide. We'll talk about that here. So selective treatment, we do a FAMACHA. Look at their eye color for homuncus. Remember that the FAMACHA only is used to determine the homuncus, which is the one we have to be worried about. It's the one that'll kill them. But that's the only parasite that the FAMACHA detects. But that's okay because that's our number one killer. The other GI worms, we want to look at fecal egg count, age of the animal. If they're under a year of age, they're probably going to have parasite issues. Do not cull a doe kid or a buck kid that's 3 to 4 months old because they have worms. Okay? Give them a chance. Deworm them. Now, if you have to deworm them every 6 weeks, yeah, that's time to cull them. But, get them up to 9 to 10 months of age, and then if you have to deworm them after that, then you've got a problem. But remember, they have to get their immune system active and working to battle these booger bears. Body condition, very important. Production level. If you've got a heavy milking dairy goat or a heavy milking sheep, they've got a lot of stress on them. They could have a really, really heavy parasite load. What does it go back to? The immune system. When they're under a lot of stress, their immune system is compromised just a little bit. So we've got to keep the immune system healthy. How do we do that? Proper nutrition. If you do proper nutrition, half your battle with parasites is won. If you don't provide them nutrition, why are you raising them? If you can't feed them, you don't need them. And I see that a lot. And then the symptoms that they're showing, do they have diarrhea? Are they weak? A lot of times when they're heavily parasitized, they have a heat intolerance. They don't want to get out there in the sunlight. They're going to be bedded down and they're going to stay in the shade until late in the evening or something like that. And they'll also be breathing hard. They don't have pneumonia. They're anemic. Okay? And anemia results in what? Low red cell, so they don't have the red cells to carry the oxygen, so they're really, really compromised with their oxygen saturation. So they're breathing hard to compensate. Okay, next slide. So this is the concept behind selective treatment. Parasites not equally distributed. We know that. We have animals that are affected and show that they're affected, and then we have very, very resistant animals. Remember, this is extremely important. 20 to 30% of the animals in your flock harbor most of the worms, harbor almost all of the worms. That is extremely important. Few animals are responsible for most of the egg production, and we're going to show that here in a second. 33% of the population within a herd or flock produce 80% of the eggs. We've got to target our treatment at that 33% in our herd or flock. If we will treat the high 33%, greatly reduces daily pasture contamination. Okay? We want to treat 1/3 of the population, gives just as good as control as treating the entire herd. When we identify those 33%, and how do we do that? With FAMACHA. Okay? When we identify that 33%, then we can treat them and reduce the population of worms. And we increase refugia and decrease resistance in the same step. Okay. So this is our little chart, and in that packet that you have the card. Remember, the body condition score, 1 is extremely thin and looks like she's from Ethiopia, unfortunately. And 5 is obese. And I have had people tell me that they've never seen a 5 animal. I says, you haven't been to an ABGA show then. Because you just go to an ABGA show and they're full of them. Yes, exactly. Fat, fat, fat. So one, but that's body condition. With FAMACHA, it's just reversed. Why they couldn't have done it the same way, I don't know. But one is really, really nice red conjunctival color. 5 is white. And 5 is the ones that you put a cross on and pray that they make it. And if you notice on your card, the 5 has a fatal dose on it. And the reason is that you just pray that you can pull them out of it. They're real critical. They have a packed cell volume of about 12 or 13. They should have 30. Okay? Why are these animals still alive? Because they reduce slowly with time and they were compensating. But if you put that animal through any stress, guess what? They die suddenly. Yeah, you get that call. I just found my goat dead. So, all right, next one. Well, and we're going to go through that out here. Remember, Haemonchus contortus. That's the only parasite we're looking at with FAMACHA. Okay. All right. Yeah. So once again, there's our poster child and his white mucous membranes. We look at bottle jaw, see if they have bottle jaw, see if they're poor condition. Look at their hair coat. Very, very important. Okay. I don't know if the St. Croix, if they shed, but do they shed do some of them do they all shed, or is one just kind of maintaining its hair and not really going through the normal shed? Well, maybe you get your hands on them and they might be a little bit thin. Once again, exercise and heat intolerance because they're anemic. And pale mucous membranes. Okay. Yep. We've already talked about this. They lose a lot of blood. This is really, really cool. So you have a 120-pound goat, sheep, whatever you want to call it. That's 10 pounds of blood. They have roughly about 10% of their body. 10% of their body weight is in blood. Okay. So 4.5, 10 pound is 4.5 kilograms. 4.5 kilograms and liters are the same. So there's 4.5 liters of blood in that animal. There's 120 ml in a half cup. These parasites, when you have a heavy burden, they can suck a half cup of blood daily. In 37 days, you have 50% blood loss. That's why you have dead animals, okay? And that's why they don't die real quick, is they compensate until they can't compensate anymore. But that's pretty crazy how much blood these little suckers will suck. Okay. This is your FAMACHA score and what their packed cell volume is. When they're white, they're less than 12. And this pretty much ran when we were doing that study out in Murray. This is really what we found. Pretty accurate. Okay? You should see a greater than 28, usually around 30 to 32. When they're red to pink, it's still good. That's still acceptable range. When they're pink, they're getting a little bit low. Pink to white, that's critical. And of course, this is deadly. Okay. So how do we do this? And we're going to demonstrate it out there. It's super easy to do. You get the animal. I usually straddle them. I crank their head to the side, and you put your thumb on top of their upper lid and push down on that lid, and what that does is it recesses the eye. And then you pull the lower conjunctiva down, just like this person is doing. And it exposes that lower conjunctiva. Now, when you first start doing this, you can have that card handy, but I'm here to tell you, once you start doing these, you won't need that card because you can flat tell what is, 1 through 5. Always do that in sunlight. Don't go out there at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Turn on the lights in the barn. Our lights are pretty good in the barn, but that's not the time you need to assess their color. You want to do it in sunlight. Even if it's overcast, it's still good, okay? Always do both eyes. Make sure you do both eyes, because every once in a while you'll get a difference. Maybe she's got a grass seed or something like that in that one eye, and she's irritated. Well, sure, she's going to have a red conjunctiva because the blood's there. Go to the other eye. If it's pale, then you got a problem. Okay? All right. Yeah. So, write down your results. You know, if you don't keep records, you're not measuring anything. You've got to have records. Did I deworm that goat 4 weeks ago? And then you go back and look, and oh my goodness, it was only 2 weeks ago. And here she is with scours again. Okay? We want to think that we can remember it, but this reason right here is why you can't remember anything. That's what I told my kids when they were growing up. I said, my memory is gone because of you guys. You know, I've had to remember too much. But I'm just picking at her. But yes, everything gets written down. But do you record that calendar from month to month? Okay. So you're talking of. I'm thinking of a dry erase board type calendar. So this is a regular paper calendar. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Perfect. You know, you got to keep records. It doesn't matter how you do it. It really doesn't matter. But it's got to be done. You got to write it down. So, okay. How often should you do FAMACHA? It all depends on your herd, your flock, you know, the stage of production. It all depends on that. You know, I can't tell you go out and you do it every month. I don't do it every month. But if I have an animal that is slow to come up to eat, is lagging behind, there's something wrong with that animal. If they don't, you know, they usually will run to see you or run the other way. But there's a response there when you go out there, okay? If there's an animal that's not acting like the rest of the group, get that animal up. First thing I do is I always look at their eye color. I want to know what's going on. And if they're a little bit on the pale side, they'll probably get dewormed, okay? I will take their temperature. You will be surprised. If you don't take temperatures and you start taking temperatures, you will be surprised. We've had several 107, 108s, and you're going, okay, this animal is going to die tonight. And you give them a little bit of Banamine and an antibiotic. And don't think that some of these heavily parasitized animals don't need some antibiotics. They generally do, because their gut is tore up by these parasites. That opens their intestinal tract for a bacteria to come in and set up shop. So anytime you have a heavily parasitized animal, kit them with a broad spectrum antibiotic as well. Real important. Good question. Can you go back one slide? So, when should you treat the threes? Okay? So, 10% of the herd scores in categories 4 or 5. You got problems. You've got problems, okay? If you don't have any 4s and 5s and they're at 3s, look at their body condition. Look at they call it tail dag. The dag on their tail. If they have scours or something like that, you look at that. Look at their coat. You know, are they doing good? Then no, you don't need to. If and I'll see some doe, you know, that'll be 3s, and I look at them, and they're in fatter than mud, and I'll do a fecal count on them, and oh my gosh, if you did a fecal count, they're loaded. But those animals are handling it on their own. Should those animals be sold? No. They are resistant to those bugs. They're fighting those bugs off by themselves. So just look at the whole animal if they're 3s. If they're 4s and 5s, they got to be dewormed. Yeah, your young animals, yeah. If I had a 3 on a wing kid, I would deworm it. Yes, because it's these guys have not developed their immunity yet to these parasites. So I certainly would. Yep. That's a good point. Stage of production. Very important. Okay, next slide. And actually, I think we can go to the next one. So, once again, this is your 5-point check is what they call it. Susan Shanahan, or I can't think of her last name, up in Maryland. She's great. If y'all don't have access to it, get on the internet, look at Small Ruminant page from Maryland. She's wonderful, okay? These are your 5-point checks: body condition, coat condition, consistency of feces, heat, exercise intolerance, and FAMACHA score. Those are the 5 things you want to look at. Don't wait for that bottle jaw. If you get bottle jaw, you've got other problems. Parasites is your biggest problem. But that animal is really compromised. Okay. I think we've already drugged this to the... We know why we're going to use FAMACHA. Okay. Which parasite... This is control parasites by determine which parasites are present, do a fecal count, look at that slide. Do we have coccidia? Do we have nematodirus? Do we have tapeworms? Do we have, or we just have a hawk complex, the Haemonchus, Oscartasia, and Trichostrongylis? When are they being transmitted? In the late fall, when we get a heavy rain, man, you see the numbers go skyrocketing. So we always, at the diagnostic lab, we call it the fall slump. Late August, September, we start seeing all of these sheep and goats come into the diagnostic lab. Sudden death. They just know it's sudden death. Well, guess what they get back? Parasite. They just spent $150 to tell them that your animal died of parasites. And they go, I knew that. And I'm going, hey, at least they didn't have something else. But you need to pay attention to that result. Okay? Which anthelmintics are you using in your flock that are effective? And you determine that with your fecal egg count. What dose is required for the host species? Make sure you dose appropriately. Appropriate time to administer anthelmintics: weaning for kids and lambs, periparturient rise, keep that in mind. I really, really push deworming at kidding or lambing. I really think that I do it after. There's this thought that you should deworm them before so that they don't pass the worms in their milk. I don't think I have ever seen that happen. My kids are literally confined until we kid primarily in December and January and February. There's no grass for them to get out and graze. When they start grazing, 30 days later is when I start seeing eggs. I never have egg problems until late April. I just don't. If they were getting worms from their mama in the milk, I would see worms long time before then. So, in dogs and cats, yes, roundworms are transmitted in the milk. In small ruminants, there is no, and I don't know why they want to deworm, get those animals up, and you run the risk of bumping a baby out. They don't all just walk into that runway and say, oh, I'm just going to walk in here peacefully and let you grab me and push something down your mouth. No, that doesn't happen that way. So, be a little bit concerned about that. And this little website here, if you guys have any questions, you guys probably already know it. Excellent resource. Excellent, excellent, excellent resource. Okay, next one. And there's a whole lot of information about biowormer on that website. Okay, so that's all fine and good for the FAMACHA, and we're going to get out there, and we're going to show you how to do this. While we're out there, I'm going to teach you a little bit about body conditioning. Let's transition over to the body condition PowerPoint. And this is a really short and sweet PowerPoint on body condition scoring. This is my big pet peeve when I'm talking. We have an annual meeting for our Kentucky Sheep and Goat Development Office. And while I always combine these two because it's so important to combine. Okay, next one. Will not touch these animals. How on earth can you look at a wooled sheep, even a heavy fleeced, hair sheep in the dead of winter, which is when they need to be assessed? You cannot without getting your hands on them. Some of these boar goats have super long, thick, dense hair. Okay. You want to assess their body condition score before you breed them because you want them to be at about a 3. On a scale of 1 to 5, you want them to be about a 3 at breeding. Why? Increases your fecundity, increases your reproductive rate. Very important. Then if you ultrasound these animals, you want to place them into gestation groups. If you've got some thin ones, you need to probably feed them a little bit extra. But if you have some fat ones, you don't want to feed them the same as the thin ones. And also determine feeding strategy. Are they growing, lactating, or just standing still and being pets? The reason why we body condition score is we want to know how thin that animal is so we can change our management structure. Okay. Yep. So this sheep and goats are the same. Sheep are going to be a little bit more level-backed and easier to assess the body condition, whereas goats, especially dairy goats, are a little bit hard to determine body condition scores. But you can still, and I'm going to show you where you need to feel. This is the lumbar vertebra of sheep or goat. It doesn't matter. When you hang a carcass and you cut it in the lumbar region where the best chops in the world are, this is what they should look like. You want them right about here. This is a 3. You can barely see the vertebral process from the spine. You notice on a 2, it kind of sticks up. On a 1, it'll cut your hand. Okay? It's really prominent. On a 5, you got this little, On a 5, you got a furrow. Water collects in that thing. They get dew poison. They get what horses get, the rain rot, because they have this little furrow that the water just sits there. And trust me, there are a lot of those 5s out there. 4, they've got a good fat covering. You notice there's no fat covering on a 1, a little bit on a 2, perfect on a 3. You don't want more than a half an inch of fat covering. These guys can have almost 1. Do you guys know that when sheep and goats, when they lay down fat, they lay fat down internally first? Remember that. If you have an animal that has fat on their ribs, their internal fat score is through the roof. Okay? Why is that a problem? Because when they're gestating and that baby's growing bigger, taking up more space, that fat is taking up space as well. They start breaking down that fat because they can't eat enough to provide nutrition to the developing fetuses. So they start breaking down that fat for energy. That develops pregnancy toxemia. You get into ketosis, pregnancy toxemia. Huge problem with fat sheep and goats. Okay? Well, we want to be right between this, a 3 and a 4. Okay, next one. Once again, this is for sheep or goats. Doesn't matter. If they're number 1, they're extremely thin. Their spinous process, in other words, their backbone. Very easy to see and feel. Very sharp. Very prominent. No fat covering over the loin eye area. Rib cage, you don't even have to feel the ribs. You can see them. Okay? A 2, just a little bit better than a 1. The rib cage may be smooth. You can feel the ribs very easily. You can feel the spinous process, but you can't visualize it as easy as you can a 1. The loin eye area is smooth, even fat cover. Okay? A 3, 2 and 3 on the loin eye area is about the same, but you'll see, and hopefully we'll have a little difference out here to show you, but you'll feel that for that muscle in the loin eye area. That's where your difference will be. The muscle kind of bulges with a 3, whereas a 2, it's kind of flat. When you get into a 4 and a 5, you've got a big, huge fat covering, so it looks like they're really rounded in the loin eye area. 4, they are fat. You can feel their ribs, but it takes a little bit to feel them. Okay? And then the spinous process, you can feel it, but it's hard to feel. And then 5, you can't feel nothing except fat. Okay? So, okay, next one. Uh-huh.
How do you manage your nose and keeping them in show condition but not over condition for your use?
You can't. That's my answer. I mean, seriously, when we're showing them, they have too much fat on them.
They are well over conditioned.
They're too over conditioned, and I don't know how. Well, I'll tell you how. With the ABGA does, those does never get to see a buck. Well, they get to see a buck, but it's on a table upside down, and they're harvesting the eggs on them. They're not putting them through gestation, because if they did put them through the gestation, they'd probably die of pregnancy toxemia. There is a fine line, okay? One thing that I do like about, we raise the market goats for the 4-H FFA show animals. They can't be fat, but they sure have to have a good covering on them. But they can't be fat, okay? So you have to get muscle. You have to convert, all that fat has to be converted into muscle that covers the ribs, that covers the spinous processes, but not fat. And I wish to goodness that we would do that in the show world with the breeding animals. Well, yes, they can be fat when you don't exercise them. But they can be, yes. But you won't find like the mature, older, year of age or older. Yes. Yep. Yes. They were. Well, the one thing that is in their favor is that they are milking. Okay? And they feed them pretty darn good. You didn't see just grass hay. And so the forage is a big key to that. Not the grain intake. The grain is definitely gives them the energy and everything like that. But that forage quality is super important to keep that rumen healthy and keep that milk flowing. And yes, there was a lot. We did the vet check for the national show, and oh my gosh, there were some fat dairy goats, especially the Nigerian dwarfs. There was some fat, but they were all milking really, really good. And so when you got that milk coming, when you've got that, they're having to do a job, then yes, they might be healthy, and their coat tells you that. They got a beautiful coat color, but and when they milk them up until 2 months before they kid. So they've always got a job. So they're always having to do some production. They're not just laying around getting fatter. Because if they fed them the same way and weren't milking them, then you get into a problem, So, but with the meat animals and with the sheep, you deal, you've got to have that fat covering to make them look level, deep, You have to. And so you deal with that. When they go into the breeding shed, some of them go on a diet. Do you put on, you have to do a little bit of planning. The diet needs to occur like 3 months before you plan on breeding them. And you put them on a diet for about 6 weeks and drop them down to about a 3.5. And they're probably a 4.5. I wouldn't say they're going to be a 5, but they're going to be 4 to 4.5. But you'll drop them down a half to a point in body condition scoring, and then you take them to the breeding shed. You want to boost them just a little bit with energy right before you take them to the breeding shed, because you don't want them to go into the breeding shed on a decline. Yep. It doesn't happen overnight. You've really got to do some advanced planning when you're doing that. So good question. Okay. So we have a group of fully fleeced sheep. Can you tell me who's a 1 and who's a 5? There is no way that you can tell without getting your hands on them. You got to feel them. We do it every day. We have graded cells throughout Kentucky, and our grader puts his hands on every animal that has a full fleece. Now, there's some goats that he doesn't have to do that with. But most of the sheep, he has to get his hands on them, even if they just have a little bit of cover on them. Wool on them. But he's got to get his hands on them. Okay. So this is our range. It's not hard to tell. You got a 1, a 3, and a 5. And that poor girl on the 5, these are old pictures, and that's not a very good picture, but it gets the point across. This is the girl we want, right there. She's got good covering. She's not fat. You can't grab a glob of fat behind her shoulders. Her brisket is filled out right here. She doesn't have muscle wasting over her top. Whereas that girl up on the top, literally a rack of bones. We don't ever want to see them that way. We talk about humane euthanasia. That girl on the top needs, that's inhumane to have them that way. Yes, she could be a 14-year-old beloved pet that doesn't have a tooth in her head. And a lot of horses, that's what we see, that are 30-year-old horses out there in a pasture. They eat, but they cannot keep up with the muscle wasting. We see it in people, As you get older, you don't assimilate your food as well. I'm waiting for that. But so anyways. But that middle girl, she's our poster child. Okay. And the same way with goats. This we'll look at this. You really want to check their chest floor. A thin animal, you're not going to have any meat there at all. You're going to feel a bone. A goat, obviously this goat up at the top is starved to death. This one in the middle is probably just right. You can get you want to feel that breastbone. You want to feel some meat there, but you don't want to feel a whole lot of fat. And then once again, the good old Angora girl, get your hands on them. Most of the Angoras in our neck of the woods are thin because they don't handle parasites good at all. Okay. And this is just another diagram to demonstrate this is a 1, 2, and you can see the loin eye. As they go up in score, how that loin eye looks. What would you rather eat, a 1 or a 5? I'd rather eat a 4 because I don't like a lot of fat on my meat. But there ain't much to eat on a 1. Nope. And seriously, if you take them to the market and they're 1s and 2s, they're going to get graded down because this is how it is. When they hang that carcass up, there's not a whole lot there. The one carcass is probably go to a dog food plant, more than likely. Okay, I think that should be it. Oh, well, that just shows when you're assessing body condition. We're going to look here first, see if we can see and feel that backbone. Then we're going to look over the ribs, and then we're going to check their chest floor. And as you go down you can see that hand, you can feel, you can really feel that chest floor, and you can tell. You can almost assess them by just feeling underneath them, just like a chicken. Have y'all ever picked up a chicken and you feel their breastbone? The ones that are doing really, really good are full. Or if they're diseased and they're not doing very good, they're just nothing but bone. Razor, yep. Same thing. That's the chicken's breastbone. Okay? I think that is it. Yep. Okay. Now we're ready to do the fun stuff. We'll go out there and we're going to do some FAMACHA scoring and talk about body condition scoring.